Welcome back and thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Our focus tonight is on the AUC race, which is culminating this Saturday as Raila Odinga faces off against other two candidates in the vote that will be made by the heads of state, 39 heads of state this Saturday. In studio, I'm joined by Dr. Kenneth Kambona, Maliba Arnold and Wilfred Moliro. Thank you so much for your time. And there's something that I learned. If you don't learn from the past, you're doomed to repeat it. So let's take a look at a story that was filed way back in January 2017 on how Kenya's former Foreign Affairs CS Amina Mohammed lost to Chad's Mahamat in the race for AUC chair. Let's listen in.
CS Amina Mohammed, as she left the Nelson Mandela Plenary Hall, immediately the election was called. Wearing a brave face after the loss, but her expression told it all. It was a bitter loss after coming too close to clinching the prestigious continental political position. Inside the plenary, it was jubilation for the Chad candidate, Musa Faki Mahamat. As he was congratulated for winning the seat. It's an election that Kenya had invested in heavily, visited at least 51 out of 54 member states, and lobbied intensely.
Kenya's ambassador Amina Mohammed ran a valiant race, but ultimately lost to the Chadian candidate. Her candidacy marked the re-emergence of Kenya at the heart of the Pan-Africa project. Kenya is grateful for the strong campaign she ran.
Sources disclosed that Kenya might have suffered betrayal after the support it expected turned against her, with allies like Uganda opting not to vote for her neighbor, while Francophone countries ganged up and voted in Mahamat.
Kenya congratulates him on a race well won. We pledge to work with him to defend the Pan-African agenda.
After running a well-oiled and heavily funded campaign, sadly Kenya has lost the AU election. But perhaps the most shocking or unexpected move was by Uganda not to vote for Kenya when it needed their support most. Will the move spark a diplomatic tiff between the two neighbors? Well, we will be watching. Duncan Hemba, KTN, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, the voting didn't spark a diplomatic tiff, but you have to learn from the past. And just to give you more information, during lobbying, Ms. Mohammed had been endorsed by Eastern African countries, but these pledges were not honored at the ballot. So it shows that Saturday might be a night of long knives, as they say, because Uganda last time, Djibouti and Burundi refused to vote for Kenya towards the tail end because they had roughly 7 rounds of voting, if I'm not wrong. So Ambassador Mohammed lost to the current chair after 7 rounds of voting. Well, what can we learn from the past, Maliba? Bearing in mind that one of our neighbors went the other way and refused to vote for Kenya, what can we learn so we don't repeat it this time?
I think we learned lessons from Amina's, let me not call it fiasco, but I mean, during Amina's run, there are lessons we learned. Okay. We've actually gotten better with time. You can actually realize that the way we did campaigns this time differ. During Amina's time, there was a lot of razzmatazz. We hit the capitals of Africa with pomp. Let me not say with high heels, but we did things with a little bit of like taking a dash across. I don't know, what do we call that? Where people do shows, walking around.
Or runway.
A runway, yes. It looks so much like a runway, doing quite flamboyant moves across the continent. But this time around, we've actually tried to go in for the personal. We've actually gone in differently. And then, like I said, Raila Odinga is not new. He's not being introduced across Africa. If he stood at the AU, honestly, it will be one of those things. You must actually be new at the AU to actually say, I do not know this guy. And of course, relatively new in Africa to actually say that you might not know Raila. Raila does not need introduction. But also at the AU, I'm saying this will be his second sojourn. He's been there before. So it has been different. But suffice to say that one of the reasons why Raila's candidature looks much more heavier is because he looks like he's reaping from President William Ruto's first year's diplomatic charm offensive that he did across the continent and across the world. The president did quite some good legwork. At that particular point, we didn't know that we would actually be having a horse in this particular race, but the president did some very good legwork at the continental level, and that has given Raila a little bit of an ease in accessing some of these capitals, without a lot of, like, for example, meeting. And by the way, don't forget that Amina had a similar experience like what the Djibouti candidate had in Kampala. It's easy to actually go and be met and say, we will actually give you our support and we will think about it. But then everybody is welcome. During campaigns, doors are open for everybody else. But that does not mean that hearts are opened. And interests do not change. Interests are actually permanent. So look at how the North is supposed to actually bring in the vice. There are other interests, not just at the AU, but at the UN, for example, that will be at play, for example. So as much as a few things might not really have pleased Kinshasa recently, but Kinshasa knows that it has got other processes that are going on at the UN, that Nairobi's influence in the region would be important at that particular platform. And people do not vote out of sentiment. And that is why a lot of us had expected that just because CS Amina had actually gone across Africa in a very spectacular way, that she would get the votes. It's beyond sentiment. It's beyond spectacle. So I still hold on to this. And I know there's a lot of red ocean thinking when you see how guys are arguing about Raila. And we've also exported our local differences to the global, or rather to the continental platform. So you actually even see a little bit of secretariats locally here of people with PhDs, well-learned people working so hard to decampaign Raila. And of course, that would be selfish for a lot of people who want consulting jobs at the AU, and they think that if Raila is there, a Kenyan is there, then a Kenyan getting consultancies looks like you probably, there's a little bit of favoritism. So we know a lot of guys, especially people who are used to international consultancies, going all out there to try and ensure that for their own personal interest, they will rather sabotage a national interest. And whereas they have got that right as individuals, but it borders on not really being patriotic.
Interesting. Kambona, as you come in, what can we learn from the past voting patterns that didn't work to our favor then? Because critics argue that these voting patterns exposed Kenya's poor grasp of regional and continental relations complexities.
Thank you. I've always held the opinion that Kenya punches below its belt weight. In what way? When it comes to international affairs and areas where we should focus and give our all to our person, parochial issues come in such a manner that they dilute the essence of what we want to achieve. And one of them, people are focusing, for instance, right now that, President Ruto wants to get rid of Raila so that he has an easy time in 2027. I mean, we can't go so low on that. Here is a Kenyan who is looking for an international job. We are trying to punch above our belt because we deserve it. When you consider all the regional economic communities where Kenya is a member, we are the leading contributors to this, and that's our taxpayers' money. We are always current in paying for our subscription. And we are always on peacekeeping missions, whether it is Sudan, South Sudan, DR Congo. Peacekeeping can be successful or not successful, and people are now really, I think the DRC you won't believe this statement, but the DRC crisis would not have come at a better time for Raila, because finally the Luanda process and the Nairobi process have come together, and it's a gain for Kenya, whether it started on a rough note, but it is a gain for Kenya. And therefore, it has shown that with that kind of diplomacy, we can export that to the rest of Africa and get all this, the guns, silence the guns. So that's number one. Number two is trade. We can also show that we are a trading hub in this region. And therefore, going back to our, let me use the word, parochial ways of looking at it, and I agree with Maliba here, my friend, that there are some comments that you read in the newspapers and you wonder, hey, are these guys really for Kenya, or they are for a certain specific reason for saying what they are saying? It is unfortunate, but I hope we can learn from that in this time. Finally, I was in Djibouti when the ambassador there was the one who led Amina's campaign, because he was eloquent in Arabic, French, English, and of course Kiswahili, comes from the coast, Joseph Mwangemi. And he has said exactly what my colleagues have said, that they lacked that unison, and therefore when we see 100 MPs there in Djibouti, of course people will comment it's a waste of... No, you need that, because it opens you to play in the global marketplace. Thank you.
Oh, so it's a show of might in one way or the other. As you come in, Muliro, and add on that issue about learning from the past, but equally, President William Ruto has pulled out all the stops in mobilizing his administration to campaign for Raila Odinga continent-wide. And foreign policy is about projecting national interests rather than personal goals. So what interests does Kenya have in Raila's victory?
Yeah, that is very good. I think you are right that I may agree with my brother who says that we are reaping. You know, we started like the president set the pace. And now it was easier to fit in. And I think it looks like Minister Musalia Mudavadi, one of his main agenda is to, in every opportunity, to make sure that the name of Raila Odinga is mentioned. But that aside, I think before I even come to what you're saying, if you look at Amina's issue, and you look at where did Mahat come from, Chad was like Madagascar in that context. And I think I'm seeing that. And I believe that the government of Kenya, Republic of Kenya, is aware that the candidate from Madagascar might be the biggest challenge than the one from Djibouti.
Why is that?
In the sense that if you look at him, he has worked at the AU also. You look at him, he's a reformer like Baba. He's a bold leader. He is very charismatic also. You know, he has made decisions globally, like when he was sacked as Minister of Foreign Affairs, is because he voted with what he thought was right, that Russia should not annex Ukraine. And he said in Africa we know issues of territorial integrity is very important. You look at Raila on the other side has done that, governance, you know, fighting on the side of the people. But this other one, as somebody has mentioned, 20 years of being a systems person, lying behind a president that removed the term limits. I think Djibouti has only had 2 presidents, and they are related. Because the current president was actually like a relative or a chief of staff of the other one. And this one has remained consistent behind. I think the AU does not need that idea of a systems person. We may need somebody who is even disruptive when AU is speaking in the international system. That will be aside. And I think the danger is because the voting looks at the threshold, 2/3. So that's why it may, you know, you go 3 times, then we start reducing, the one with votes reduces. But even when you remain alone, you have to go up to that level. And that's where now the worry, JC, is that we are beginning this time round. I still go back to the reforms that came. They are good and also risky. that this time round, the ministers will vote in the commissioners. You see that? Then from there now we move to vote in the assembly. The president now vote in the chair and the deputies.
Yeah.
The challenge there is that we have people who are promising us because they also want us to vote for them as commissioners.
Scratch my back, I scratch yours.
So I think there we have to lie very low, not be until maybe the commissioners have voted.
Okay.
Because you don't know who will win.
Okay.
Somebody can win and changes on our part.
All right.
Yes. But then...
briefly.
Your question.
Yes.
Just remind a bit.
All to do with Kenya's interest. Well, what do we stand today?
Yes. Apart from, it was a reverse, what you are saying. It should be like the reverse. These people think you want to consult with the AU, should work very hard to have a Kenyan at the top there. So there are some reasons. One is obviously the geopolitical weight, and South Africa was there, and it opens more avenues even at the UN.
Okay.
Kenya will be having our person there as the link and spokesman. Africa is rising, so he'll be the spokesperson of the continent at global areas.
Yeah.
And AU is struggling with matters of international candidatures, and some of them begin there. There are those international jobs in the atomic, in World Health, and the rest. The cooking is done at the AU level nowadays. We agree on one candidate, and they move.
Okay.
So there are very many opportunities for people, individually, in fact, even.
That's well noted. Okay. We're a little bit pressed of time, so final comments around the table. And we'll start with you, Maliba, because looking at all the eventualities on the table, if Raila wins or in the eventuality that he loses, what difference will his victory or loss make in the Kenyan political landscape? I have to bring you a little bit closer home as we finalize. What do you think will happen?
I think Saturday is a very important day for Kenya, as much as it's important for Africa, because if Baba wins, one thing happens. Then automatically we will actually have to do a national readjustment, because then our politics for the last about 25 years have actually been very Baba-centric. Whether it's centrifugal or petrifugal, whatever way you're looking at it, it's been very much Baba-centric.
Okay.
So in this case, it means that if Baba wins, then his strongholds must actually align. And that brings in issues of, for example, there's an impending civil war. Even as we all fight for victory at the AU, there is actually an impending civil war within the ODM ranks. Because like I've said before, looking at how Orengo has actually showed up, there's now the 1992 Orengo showing up. It will become so difficult that Gladys Wanga becomes the leader of James Orengo. Because how do you measure the two? There is the place of Babu who feels shortchanged. Okay. So on that side, on the from Baba's stronghold, and even in his party, there is going to be a little bit of tectonic movement. There will be realignment. On that end, a civil war until a leader is found, if one is there or a new order comes in. On this other side also, a lot of people have made political capital by being against Baba, by a lot of policies, and how even some people have actually made a career by simply defining their politics about being anti-Baba. Okay. That also will actually be out of play.
All right.
So there's going to be a national realignment locally. But if he also doesn't win, I have seen Baba look very magnanimous. He says, Mimi nimeenda. He gave away the leadership in ODM. He surrendered. I do not think that Baba will be willing to actually come out of, or rather come from a high platform like the AU and then put on the party leader's position. It will feel like he
stepped down.
He's going too down. So he will remain, again, around that.
Right.
I think Baba will also be like, the way, like he told us in Nairobi, this is how I want it done, mimi nimeenda. I do not think he will go back on that word. Baba ameenda.
Alisema kishindu akona nyumbani atarudi. Akona kwao. Okay. Kambona, really briefly, because Baba's campaigned over 8 pillars. Talk to us about,
What we are seeing is history repeating itself. President Uhuru Kenyatta supported Baba to get the AU High Representative for Infrastructure. Baba was there. Baba came back and President Uhuru took him and campaigned for him for the presidency. That's the Kenya I'm seeing.
Okay.
So whether Baba loses or if he loses, then I don't see a problem in a negotiation with the current president for a safe landing in whichever way, one or another.
Okay.
So that is because we've seen that before. President Uhuru really fought for Baba in both ways,
Okay.
at AU High Representative for Infrastructure and as president candidate in the last election.
Well noted.
Yes.
Muliro, your final take on this matter.
I would say this, not so much on domestic politics, I'm not very good at that, but I think Africa now, looking at even the barometer itself, and they are more integrated and they think through matters. Kenya has really carried the burden of regional peace and security. Kenya is an anchor state. Kenya has carried the burden of hosting refugees across the continent. Kenya is up to date in matters of paying its subscription to regional organizations.
Okay.
And its candidate is also not a new person on the continent in matters of reform and good governance. And therefore, I feel that the continent is going to reward the country and its candidates.
Well, we definitely hope for that and trust us as KTN to keep you updated on that particular race. Our very own Daniel Karaoke will be landing in Addis Ababa tomorrow evening just to bring us up to speed with the intricacies behind that race to AUC. And remember, the entry is quite wide, from matters to do with tackling Africa's high poverty levels to unemployment, runaway debt, insecurity, illiteracy, poor health services and energy needs, among other issues. Raila Odinga has campaigned on 8 pillars, and we definitely will see if Africa will embrace his vision or will Kenya's political landscape shift. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. Definitely appreciate your input and your knowledge around this particular matter. I was joined in studio by Wilfred Muliro, who's a regional affairs analyst and foreign policy expert, equally joined by Dr. Kenneth Kambona, an international development consultant, and Maliba Arnold, a public policy analyst. Gentlemen, I look forward to hosting you once the Saturday vote is cast, and we see the dynamics that will change thereafter. My name is Jesse Rogers. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're adequately informed. My colleague Ashley Mazuri and our sign language interpreter was Damian Evans. Have yourself a good evening.